What's up guys, today I'm bringing you a new kind of video, and it's a bit of an homage to the very first YouTubers that I ever watched, which was Call of Duty commentators over 10 years ago playing games like Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops 1. I'm sure some of you also remember those times fondly, and today not only did I have the perfect game that was plagued by copyrighted music, but I also have a great topic to discuss. But first, make sure you smash that like button, and for the big percentage of you guys that are not subscribed but keep coming back, I appreciate you, but come on. That's what the button's for. And you can also catch me on Twitch at midnight PST, link in the description, and deck list in the Discord as always. Okay, so today's topic is the Legend Dumpster. And what do we mean when we say the Legend Dumpster? What qualifies as the dumpster? So I'm going to refer to the dumpster as the general range in Legend when you start facing a lot of low-ranked, non-Legend opponents. In higher Legend, you do also face non-Legend opponents, but they're usually higher MMR players playing high-tier decks. Okay, so now that we know what the dumpster is, why are we talking about it? So earlier this week on Twitter, Dr. Evil_HS posted this tweet, quote, "I hate the MMR system. It discourages you from playing anything new. My MMR probably sucks because I like to play meme decks, but I have a pretty good win rate with this deck, but it doesn't matter. I can win this many," and in the tweet she had a 17-2 record displayed, "in a row, and I barely gain 100 ranks. So discouraging." And this sentiment was shared by a vast majority of players that responded to the tweet, and it was a big tweet. And in another reply she said, to clarify, like, "Sorry, I don't want to play meta decks, I want to try new things, but when you try new things and lose, it fucks your MMR, and I don't know, it's just so aggravating, I hate it." So the first thing I wanted to say about this topic is that this isn't a criticism of anyone personally, and really Dr. Evil's tweet just represents a big share of what the community is thinking, so this isn't just about her. Also, I tried to share my opinion on Twitter, but I don't think it came across very well. My intention was never to stir anything up, but rather just to share my viewpoint. Ultimately, I view Twitter as a platform for shit-talking, and never for real serious discussion, so keep that in mind since it goes both ways, we're all just kind of shit-talking. So with that out of the way, I actually don't think the new MMR system is a problem at all. In fact, I think it's great and a massive improvement from the old one, but I'm mostly going to talk about the new one today. So the specific set of complaints that I think I gathered from these tweets, from what Dr. Evil said and what others said, is basically three main things. And so the first, and this is the most common one, that you need too high of a win rate to climb out of the Legend Dumpster. Okay. Number two, you should not suffer dire future consequences for not playing top tier decks. And then three, the time required to climb out of the dumpster is too much. Okay, so let's talk about each of these individually. First, that you need too high of a win rate to climb out of the dumpster. On paper, this one looks pretty damning because people have tracker data on this. I do agree that you need basically about a 68% win rate, maybe a 70, give or take, to climb out of the dumpster at an appreciable pace. So at first that sounds really bad, like 68%, that's crazy. But here's the thing, in the dumpster, you simply don't play good opponents. A 68% win rate is, for top players, not incredibly hard against this bunch. And one thing is that a lot of players feel like they're facing good players, but if you actually look back at the replays, you'll see that your opponents make a lot of mistakes, especially when you look at the replay and understand what cards they had in hand and what decision they made with those cards in hand. This is especially evident in Quest Mage games. I almost never come across an opponent that's non-Legend playing Quest Mage that even came remotely close to maximizing their chance to win. So this does tie into the second point, which is that you should be able to play off-meta decks. On a competitive ladder, I hate to say it, but this just doesn't work. Strong players can sometimes pick off-meta decks to counter something specific that they're seeing, or just catch opponents off guard, but most of the time, if you play crap, you're just going to lose. So for the third point, that it takes a long time to get out of the dumpster, this is just true no matter what. I totally agree with this point. Competitive ladders are a grind, and with many thousands of people in Legend now, you are just going to have to play a lot to stay on top, so I do agree with that. And to kind of respond to the original tweet with these points, I don't believe that the dumpster or the required win rate is the problem. But yes, it does take a long time, and I agree that off-meta decks don't get the job done. So in general, I must say that this is pretty similar to the old system. This is not actually a diversion from the old system. Before, you could not really play off-meta decks except for the fact that Legend had an absolute bottom that was much, much more shallow than it is now. Now, you could lose 100 games in a row and each one would cost you maybe 100 ranks of Legend points. But before, you could only drop to the very bottom, which might have been 300 or 500, and it's not too hard to climb out of there because you only have 300 ranks to gain. So outside of that, though, I feel like the system is pretty much the same, that the required win rate is actually not that high compared to what it used to be. But I think I do resonate with players' frustration. I think that they have a good cause to be concerned about, but are having a hard time putting their finger on exactly what it is that's making the game a problem right now. And so what's wrong with Wild Hearthstone right now is the meta. And I don't say this lightly, but every deck right now is bullshit. And so here, let me go down Tempo Storm's latest meta snapshot. Not exact order, or, I don't necessarily agree with everything here, but just to get a general sample of the meta. Okay, so you have Pirate Warrior at the top. So this deck has problems with cannon draws, patches draws, whether or not you get a Reno opponent, whether or not that Reno opponent draws Reno, or if your opponent plays Ooze or double Ooze or triple Ooze, and do they draw them. So a lot of Pirate Warrior is out of your hands, of course. Reno Priest, whether or not you draw Raza or Anduin, is totally out of your hands. Quest Mage, you guys don't need my help on that one. And then Odd Demon Hunter, I think Odd Demon Hunter's relatively fair for Wild, but in the mirror, it comes down to who goes first. You still have, does your opponent draw Reno? Do I get mana burn against Quest Mage? Do I get the 1-drops against the decks that can't respond? Do I get the freezes against Pirate Warrior? And you can take my word that the tier 2 decks are exactly the same. So what you have is not a system that's designed in a flawed way. 70% against bad players sounds like a lot, but it's really not that bad. And I think that most of the players talking about this could absolutely achieve that in a balanced and fair meta. But I think the meta right now is not all that good. I think there are a lot of things that need to be improved. I think the decks need to rely less on randomness and card draw, and I think that matchups shouldn't be so polarized that you kind of know how the game is going to go right as soon as you queue up a class and you know what deck they are. It doesn't really take opponent skill to draw Reno, or not draw patches, or hit the cannon perfectly, or get the right spells off of Mana Cyclone. That's another huge one. Too many games in this meta are decided by the time the mulligan is over. And this is not the first time that Wild has been this way. Wild has been this way a huge number of times, and we've come back every time stronger for it. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. But I feel like in this meta of relative win rate balance, there are top decks, but there isn't a top deck. There's no tier S deck right now. Every deck, yes, has counters, but a lot of times it comes down to, when you climb, are you facing those counters or are you facing everything else? Did you get a little unlucky in your opponent, or did your opponent get a little lucky in how they drew? And oftentimes I find that dictates the game more than my skill. And this problem is definitely worse than ever. So overall, I generally think that what Dr. Evil's saying is misplaced. I think that the correct thing to be upset about in this meta is the meta itself, and not the fact that the MMR changes have happened. I think that a lot of these players that are talking about this system absolutely have the skills and would have the win rate required to make this if the meta wasn't completely determined by what they were queuing and what their opponent queued and how the mulligans went for those decks. And that's unfortunate. For me, I've found that as a good player with a lot of time who knows what the best decks are, yes, I can jam the very top tier decks over a long period of time, and the law of large numbers dictates that as long as my deck is good enough, as long as my skill is good enough, I'm going to climb ranks. But I still suffer from the same problem, which is that I'll queue up a deck, I'll face an opponent that I'm very likely to win against, I get the right hand, I do everything correctly, and then despite that, they just high roll me. And Wild has always been a little bit about those high rolls, so I don't think that needs to disappear completely, because then it would just be a beefier version of Standard, which would be fun, but it's not really the game mode that we know and love. I think that the swingy nature of Wild does dictate that we actually get some very interesting games where you have to play to your outs. And this game that we're watching right here is sort of an instance of that, where when things are looking not so great for us, we play Puzzle Box. And I think understanding that Puzzle Box was actually the correct play there does take some skill. But it takes absolutely no skill for me to high roll the Puzzle Box, say I got it off Cyclone instead of having chat pick it for me. It doesn't take any skill to get it off of Cyclone, and it doesn't take any skill to dictate whether or not it ends up good or bad. And I find that particularly frustrating. But let's focus and actually talk about the game at hand here, because this is a really fantastic game, and I wanted to give some commentary once my opinion was out of the way. So, the reason that we picked Puzzle Box is that I asked chat which one they wanted me to pick, and of course they picked Puzzle Box. And when we played it, I think it actually was the correct play. But if you've been focusing on the commentary, we actually did get a Dead Man's Hand, and so we shuffled a couple more Giants, and the Time Warp back into our deck. And then last turn we played the Deck of Wonders. So our deck is almost entirely a bunch of random garbage right now, which I think is fantastic. And you might as well play the second Scroll of Wonder just to really shake things up. And looking back here, I'm not sure. Yep. Okay. I definitely agree with my decision in the past. I think that was the correct play, to play around future Spreading Plagues. The thing is, against Druid with Quest Mage, you just want to put out basically one Giant at a time, because they don't run single target removal, so they have to use Seeds basically every time you play a Giant. But you have 4 Giants, so if you play them one by one, they're basically completely helpless once you play the Giant after the last Seeds is gone. And of course, if this game couldn't get any crazier, I think this may set a record for the most random effects cast in a short series of turns. The most random outcome of any Hearthstone game played in maybe of all time. And so here my health is low, so I actually have to go in on the quest. With cards like Branching Paths is already gone, but even with the opposing hero power, a lot of damage can come down. And I can't risk getting lethaled on the next turn, so we have no choice to go in. And we get a pretty decent draw. I really wanted to play the Jan'alai this game, but the hero powers just didn't make sense at any point. I just couldn't fit them in. Had to play the random effects first. And that's game. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you appreciated the commentary. If you have any comments on this, make sure to leave them in the comments section. And again, I do stream every single night at midnight Pacific if you'd like to catch me on Twitch. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Ladder.